After my husband passed away, I believed the worst pain was already behind me. I was wrong. 3 days after the funeral, my phone rang late in the evening. The number was unfamiliar. I almost ignored it. Grief makes you tired of voices, but something told me to answer. "Mrs. Eleanor Hayes?" a man asked calmly. "Yes. My name is Richard Cole. I was your husband's employer for nearly 3 decades. I need you to come to my office tomorrow morning. Alone." Alone. Then came the words that made my hands tremble. "Please don't tell your son or your daughter-in-law. Not yet. You may be in danger." I sat frozen on the edge of the bed I had shared with Daniel for 47 years. Danger? I was a 69-year-old widow who barely had the energy to make tea. Earlier that day, my son Aaron had spoken to me the way people speak to children. "Mom, just rest. Claire and I will handle everything." At the funeral, they stood in front, making decisions, receiving condolences, while I felt invisible. Daniel had always called me his equal, but now, without him, I was suddenly fragile. As I stared at the dark screen of my phone, one thought echoed in my mind. Why would my husband's boss warn me about my own family? And why did Daniel never tell me what he was afraid of? I will reveal what awaited me behind that office door, and why I almost turned back.
The next morning, I dressed with more care than I had since Daniel's funeral. Not for vanity, but for armor. I chose the charcoal coat he always said made me look unshakable, even though my hands were trembling as I drove downtown. Richard Cole's office sat at the top of a glass tower Daniel had worked in for years. I'd never been past the lobby before. This time, the receptionist didn't ask questions. She simply nodded, as if she'd been expecting me. Richard stood when I entered. He didn't offer sympathy first. That alone told me this meeting wasn't about comfort. "Mrs. Hayes," he said quietly, closing the door behind me, "your husband trusted you more than anyone. That's why you're here." He placed a thick folder on the desk. Inside were handwritten notes, Daniel's handwriting, dates, times, conversations. "For the last 6 months," Richard continued, "Daniel believed someone close to you was pressuring him to change legal documents, control finances, medical decisions, your future." My chest tightened. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Aaron would never—" "He didn't sign anything," Richard interrupted gently. "That's why this file exists." Before I could ask more, a sudden knock echoed through the office. Too sharp. Too familiar. The door handle turned, and the last people I expected to see stepped inside. I will expose why they followed me, and what they were afraid I'd discover.
Aaron froze the moment he saw me. Claire recovered faster. She always did. Her face softened into that practiced concern I used to mistake for care. "Mom," Aaron said slowly, "why didn't you tell us you were coming here?" Richard didn't answer for me. He stepped back, silent, watching. "I didn't know I needed permission," I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. Claire let out a nervous laugh. "Eleanor, this really isn't the place for you right now. You've been through a lot. Stress isn't good for your memory." Memory. That word landed like a blade. Richard finally spoke. "This meeting is private." Aaron's jaw tightened. "With respect, sir, my mother isn't in the right state to handle complicated matters. We're just trying to protect her." Protect me? I looked at my son, really looked, the way he avoided my eyes, the way Claire's fingers gripped his sleeve, silently urging him on. Richard slid the folder closer to me. "Mrs. Hayes, your husband asked me to show you everything if this moment ever came." Claire's smile faltered. "What things?" I asked. "Drafts of power of attorney papers, medical notes that don't match reality, and plans made without your consent." Aaron stepped forward. That's not what this looks like. But suddenly, I realized something chilling. They weren't worried about me being here. They were afraid of what I might remember. I will reveal what my husband had been quietly recording and why he believed time was running out.
My fingers trembled as I opened the folder. Page after page carried Daniel's handwriting, neat, deliberate, unmistakably his. Dates circled, names underlined, conversations recorded like evidence in a trial. He started documenting everything, Richard said softly, because he didn't want you doubting yourself. I looked up sharply. Doubting myself? Aaron shifted. Claire crossed her arms. Richard continued. Your husband told me Claire suggested, repeatedly, that you were forgetting things, misplacing items, losing track of conversations. That's not true, I said instinctively. Daniel knew that, Richard replied. That's why he began testing it. I read one entry aloud, my voice shaking. March 12th. Claire says Eleanor forgot lunch plans. I watched her write it on the calendar herself. Another. April 3rd. Keys missing. Found later in Aaron's car. My breath caught. Moments flooded back. Times I apologized. Times I'd felt embarrassed, ashamed. Claire snapped, "This is being taken out of context." Is it? I asked quietly. Aaron finally exploded. Mom, you're tired. Dad filled your head with paranoia. But as I turned the page, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A partially completed medical assessment with my name on it. Diagnosis, early cognitive decline, unsigned. I looked at Richard. Who prepared this? Before he could answer, the office phone rang, and Richard went pale. Mrs. Hayes, he said slowly, this call changes everything. Richard stared at the phone for a second too long before answering. I didn't hear the voice on the other end, but I watched the color drain from his face. Yes, he said carefully. She's here. A pause. I understand. He hung up and looked straight at me. Mrs. Hayes, that was security. Someone accessed your husband's private files last night. Files only 3 people knew about. My stomach tightened. 3? You, your husband, and the person he feared most. Aaron laughed nervously. This is ridiculous. Are you accusing us of hacking something? Richard didn't blink. I'm saying Daniel believed his notes would disappear after his death. That's why he didn't keep them at home. Claire stepped closer to me, lowering her voice. Eleanor, you're overwhelmed. Let's go home. We'll talk to a doctor, sort this out properly. A doctor. The word echoed. That's when I remembered something Daniel had said weeks before he died. If anyone tells you you're confused, ask yourself, who benefits? I looked at my son. Aaron, did you ever ask Dad to sign anything without me present? His silence was answer enough. Richard spoke again, slower now. Daniel told me if his records were touched, it meant the plan was already in motion. What plan? I whispered. Richard met my eyes. To remove your independence, legally. Just then, a sound came from the adjoining room. A cough. Low. Familiar. My heart nearly stopped. Because I knew that cough. I will reveal the impossible truth standing behind that door and why my husband's death wasn't what it seemed. The door to the adjoining room opened slowly. For a split second, my mind refused to understand what my eyes were seeing. My body reacted before logic could catch up. My knees weakened, my breath vanished, and the world tilted. Daniel stood there, alive. Thinner, yes, older somehow, but unmistakably my husband. The man I had buried 4 days ago. The man whose coffin I had touched with shaking hands. Ellie, he said softly, using the name only he ever used. I'm here. I don't remember standing up,
I only remember touching his face, terrified it would dissolve under my fingers. "You died," I whispered. Daniel shook his head. "No, I disappeared." Behind me, Aaron cursed under his breath. Claire let out a sharp, panicked gasp. Richard closed the door and locked it. "I didn't fake my death to hurt you," Daniel said, holding my hands tightly. "I did it because I ran out of time. They were getting closer. Documents, doctors, decisions you never agreed to." Aaron finally found his voice. "This is insane." "No," Daniel replied, his tone hardening. "What you planned was insane." He turned to me. "Ellie, there's more you need to hear. And once you do, nothing will ever go back to the way it was. I will expose the recordings Daniel left behind and the plan my own son never thought I'd uncover."
Daniel crossed the room and reached into his jacket. His hands were steady, too steady for a man who had just revealed he was supposed to be dead. He placed a small voice recorder on the desk. "You didn't think I'd leave everything to paper, did you?" he said, looking straight at Aaron. Claire's face drained of color. "You recorded us?" "I documented patterns," Daniel replied calmly. "And when patterns repeat, they tell a story." He pressed a button. Aaron's voice filled the room. Casual, confident, unfamiliar. "If Mom signs the medical evaluation, everything becomes easier. Dad's just emotional. He won't block it forever." Claire's voice followed. "Once she's declared unfit, the house sale is automatic. We'll move fast before anyone questions it." I felt like the air had been punched out of my chest. Daniel stopped the recording. "That conversation happened 3 weeks before my death," he said quietly. "The same week you asked me to meet that doctor alone." Aaron stepped back. "You're twisting this." "No," I said, surprising myself. My voice didn't shake. "You were planning my life without me in it." Silence fell, heavy, undeniable. Daniel leaned closer to me. "Ellie, the next part is worse, because they weren't just planning to control you. They were counting on me being gone. I will reveal how far the plan really went, and the line my son was willing to cross." I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to tell me I'd misunderstood, that he was wrong, that this was fear talking. But his eyes held something far worse than fear. "They didn't just prepare for my death," he said slowly. "They expected it." Aaron's face hardened. "Dad, you had heart problems. Anyone could see that." "Yes," Daniel replied. "And you made sure I felt them." Claire took a step back. "That's not fair." Daniel opened the folder again and pulled out a pharmacy receipt. "Do you recognize this?" I leaned forward. My name was on it. Medication I had never taken. "Those pills," Daniel continued, "were slipped into my supplements for weeks. Small doses. Enough to elevate blood pressure. Enough to make a heart attack. Convenient." The room spun. Aaron shouted, "You can't prove that." Richard spoke for the first time in minutes. "Actually, we can. Toxicology reports were delayed. Intentionally." Claire's voice cracked. "We never wanted him dead. We just needed time." "Time? Time for what?" Daniel looked at me, his voice breaking. "They needed time to make sure you'd be declared unfit before I could stop them." I felt something inside me snap. Not loudly, but completely. My son hadn't just betrayed me. He had planned for my husband to disappear. I will reveal the decision I made in that moment. The one that ended our family. Forever. I thought there would be screaming, tears, maybe denial so strong it would knock me to the floor. Instead, there was clarity,
a calm, terrifying clarity. I stood up and faced my son, not the boy I raised, the man in front of me, hollowed out by greed and entitlement. Aaron, I said quietly, you don't get to explain anymore. Claire opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. No, I've listened for months. I've apologized for things I didn't do. I've questioned my own mind so you wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Daniel stepped beside me, his hand warm on my back. I trusted you, I continued, and you used that trust as a weapon. Aaron's voice broke. Mom, please, we can fix this. I shook my head. Some things can't be fixed. They can only be ended. I turned to Richard. I want everything filed. Every recording, every document. Today. Claire panicked. You can't do this. We're family. I looked at her one last time. Family doesn't plan funerals. Security escorted them out. Aaron didn't look back. As the door closed, I felt grief, but not for what I lost, for what I almost did. I will reveal the aftermath and why freedom sometimes feels like grief before it feels like peace. The silence after they left was louder than any argument. I sat down slowly, as if my body finally understood what had happened. Daniel stayed beside me, not speaking, not rushing me toward relief. He knew better. 47 years teaches you when words would only get in the way. Legal steps followed quickly. Documents filed, investigators contacted, timelines reconstructed. I signed papers with a steadiness that surprised even me. It felt unreal, like I was watching someone else reclaim her life. That night, Daniel and I didn't go home. We stayed in a quiet hotel on the edge of the city, the kind with dim lights and no memories. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying Aaron's childhood laugh, the way he used to fall asleep on my shoulder during long drives. Grief doesn't disappear when the truth comes out. It just changes shape. I keep wondering, I whispered into the dark, when I stopped being his mother and became his obstacle. Daniel squeezed my hand. When you refused to disappear. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains. For the first time in months, my chest didn't feel tight. The fear was gone, the confusion too. But peace hadn't arrived yet, not fully. Because ending one life, meek, obedient, doubting, meant stepping into another. And I wasn't sure who I'd become next. I will reveal the confrontation I never expected, and the letter that almost broke my resolve. 3 weeks passed without a word from Aaron or Claire. No calls, no apologies disguised as concern, just silence, thick and uneasy. I told myself that was good, necessary even. Then, one afternoon, while Daniel was out meeting with our attorney, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name, written in a handwriting I knew too well. My hands hesitated before opening it. Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not even sure I understand myself anymore. The words blurred as I read on. Aaron wrote about panic, debt, fear, about how one bad decision became 2, then 10. How convincing himself I was confused made everything easier, until it didn't. I never meant to hurt you, he wrote. I just wanted control. That sentence cut deeper than any accusation. He didn't ask to see me, didn't ask for money, only wrote that therapy had been ordered as part of an investigation, and for the first time, he was being forced to sit with what he'd done. When Daniel returned, he found me still holding the letter. Do you want to respond? He asked gently. I folded it carefully. Not yet. Because forgiveness, I realized, isn't a moment. It's a decision, and I wasn't sure which way I was leaning. I will reveal the choice I made and why silence became my strongest answer. I didn't reply to Aaron's letter. Not that day, not the next week, not even when I reread it late at night, searching for the son I used to know between the lines. Silence, I learned, can be an answer.
Daniel worried I was being too hard on myself. "You don't owe him clarity," he said gently. "You've given enough." So instead of writing back, I focused on what had been ignored for too long. Me. We sold the house quietly. Too many memories lived in those walls, and not all of them were kind anymore. With Richard's help, we tied up every legal loose end, severed every financial threat that connected our past to our future. One morning, over coffee, Daniel asked, "What would you do if no one needed anything from you?" The question stunned me. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've never lived like that." So we started small. Walks, books, mornings without urgency. I stopped explaining my choices to imaginary critics who no longer mattered. But healing isn't linear. Some nights, guilt still crept in, soft, persuasive, familiar. And just when I thought I'd found my footing, the phone rang. An unknown number. The voicemail that followed carried news I hadn't prepared for. I will reveal the call that forced me to confront my past and decide what kind of future I truly wanted. I let the call go to voicemail. Old habits die slowly, and part of me still believed that if something was important, it would find a gentler way to reach me. But when I listened to the message, my chest tightened. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Detective Lauren Miles. I'm calling regarding the ongoing investigation involving your son. My son." 2 simple words, heavy with history. I sat at the kitchen table long after the message ended, the coffee growing cold in my hands. Daniel noticed immediately. He always did. "They need a statement," I said before he could ask. He nodded. "Only if you're ready." At the station, the walls felt too white, too clean, like they were designed to strip emotion from the air. Detective Miles was calm, respectful. She spoke in facts, not accusations. "There's evidence of financial abuse," she said. "Forgery, coercion, and attempted medical manipulation." Attempted. That word stayed with me. "Your cooperation could help close this," she added, "but we won't pressure you." Pressure. Another familiar feeling. As I signed the statement, my hand didn't shake, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. When I stood to leave, the detective paused. "For what it's worth, most people don't have your courage." Outside, the air felt lighter. But as we drove home, I wondered something I hadn't allowed myself to ask before. When the case ended, what would closure actually look like? I will reveal the unexpected visitor who challenged everything I thought closure meant. 2 evenings after my statement, the doorbell rang just after sunset. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the glass, I saw a woman standing on the porch, her posture stiff, her hands clasped as if she were holding herself together by force alone. It took me a moment to recognize her. Claire. I didn't open the door right away. Daniel stood beside me, silent, letting the choice be mine. When I finally stepped outside, the night air felt heavy. Claire looked thinner, older, stripped of the confidence she once wore like armor. "I won't come in," she said quickly. "I just needed to say something." I crossed my arms. "Say it." Her voice shook. "Aaron blames me. The investigation, the charges. He says I pushed everything." I felt no satisfaction hearing that. "He wants me to testify against him," she continued. "I won't." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She swallowed. "Because I need you to know I was wrong. About everything. About you." The apology hung there. Fragile. Insufficient. "I didn't see you as a person," she admitted. "Only as an obstacle." At least she was honest. "I can't give you forgiveness," I said quietly. "But I can give you this. Don't come back." Tears filled her eyes. She nodded and stepped away. As the door closed, I realized something unsettling. That wasn't closure.
it was only the beginning. I will reveal the trial that followed, and the moment my son finally spoke the truth out loud.
The courtroom was quieter than I expected. No dramatic outbursts, no shouting, just the slow, methodical unfolding of facts that could no longer be buried. Aaron sat at the defense table, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the wood in front of him. For a moment, I saw the boy who used to avoid eye contact when he knew he'd disappointed me. But this wasn't a broken vase or a missed curfew. This was betrayal. When it was his turn to speak, the room felt smaller. "I convinced myself it was for the best," he said, voice tight. "That my mother didn't need to know. That control was the same as care." I felt Daniel's hand tighten around mine. Aaron finally looked up at me. For the first time in months, his voice cracked without calculation. "I planned around your life instead of respecting it," he said, "and I don't know how I became someone who could do that." The judge listened without expression. The sentence came later: probation, restitution, mandatory counseling, consequences measured in years. But the real weight fell in that moment. As we stood to leave, Aaron whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." I didn't answer. Some truths arrive too late to be received the way they want to be. Outside the courthouse, the sky was painfully blue, and I realized something final had ended there, but something new was waiting. I will reveal the move that changed everything and why starting over felt terrifying and right at the same time. We didn't tell anyone we were leaving. No announcements, no explanations, just boxes, quiet decisions, and a house that slowly stopped feeling like home. Too many echoes lived there, some loving, some unbearable. Daniel suggested the move first. Not to run, he said, but to breathe. So we chose a small town 3 hours away. Nothing fancy, just trees, space, and mornings that didn't feel heavy. The kind of place where no one knew our story, and more importantly, didn't need to. On our last night in the old house, I walked through every room alone. I touched the door frame where I'd measured Aaron's height as a child, the kitchen table where birthdays were celebrated, the hallway where I'd once cried quietly, wondering when my life had stopped feeling like my own. Grief came, but so did relief. The new house was smaller, simpler, no extra rooms filled with ghosts. On the first morning there, Daniel made coffee while sunlight spilled across unfamiliar walls. "Do you miss it?" he asked. I thought for a moment. I miss who I was before I doubted myself. And I knew then, this move wasn't an escape. It was a beginning. I will rebuild a life when no one is asking you to justify it anymore. I didn't open the letter again. Not that night, not the next morning. I let it sit on the table, face down, as if turning it over might pull me back into a life I had finally learned how to live without. A year had passed since the trial, a year of quiet mornings, of walks that didn't feel rushed, of laughter that wasn't followed by guilt. And slowly, something remarkable had happened. I stopped rehearsing explanations for my existence. Daniel never pushed me. He understood that some decisions don't come from logic. They come from scars. One evening, as we watched the sunset from the porch, he asked gently, "If you say yes, what do you lose?" The question landed deeper than expected. "I lose peace," I answered honestly, "and I don't know if I'd ever get it back." So I wrote back, not with anger, not with longing, just truth. "I hope you continue therapy. I hope you build a life that doesn't depend on taking from others. But contact with me is not part of my healing." I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I sealed the envelope and felt something loosen inside my chest. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. And with clarity came something unexpected. Freedom without fear. I will reveal the moment I finally forgave myself and why that mattered more than forgiving anyone else. The forgiveness came quietly, not in a dramatic moment, not with tears or long speeches. It arrived on an ordinary afternoon while I was folding laundry in the sunlit room of our new home. I caught my reflection in the window. Older, yes, but steadier. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry at the woman staring back. For months, I had blamed her for trusting too easily, for doubting herself, for apologizing when she had done nothing wrong. But standing there, I understood something simple and powerful. She wasn't weak. She was loving. And love, when misused by the wrong people, doesn't become foolish. It becomes wounded. I sat down and allowed myself to grieve, not just the loss of my son, but the years I spent shrinking to keep others comfortable, the guilt I carried for choosing peace, the fear that protecting myself made me unkind. That afternoon, I let it all go. Not Aaron, not the past, but the belief that I had failed as a mother or as a woman. I hadn't failed. I had survived. And in surviving, I had finally learned how to live. I will bring the final reflection, the truth I wish every woman like me could hear before it's too late.
This morning, I woke up before Daniel and stepped outside with a cup of tea. The air was cool, the sky pale with promise. Somewhere in the distance, birds argued over nothing important. And I smiled, because this life, quiet, honest, unafraid, was mine. I no longer measure my worth by how much I sacrifice or how much pain I endure for others. I don't confuse love with obedience. I don't mistake control for care. If you are listening to my story and feel a knot in your chest, let me say this gently. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. And you are never too old to choose yourself. Family should feel safe. Love should never require you to disappear. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away, without hatred, without drama, just truth. I lost a son, but I found myself. And that, at the end of my life's longest lesson, is the freedom I will never give up again. If this story stayed with you till the end, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed it, please support the channel by liking the video or leaving a small tip. It really helps keep these stories coming. I share many emotional, real-life stories like this, so subscribe and explore the channel. You'll also see more stories on my channel that many viewers love. Thank you for being here. See you in the next one.